乐速，长菩提，乐速。Good morning.
Good morning, Your Holiness. On behalf of the Asia Teaching Organizers, thank you for making today's teaching possible. We have organizers from 6 countries, a total of 8 of us, and we're very happy to have this teaching with you today. And we'll start the teaching with 2 Heart Sutra chanting. We'll have the first chanting, Pali chanting by 3 monks from Chiang Mai Meditation Center, followed by the Chinese Heart Sutra chanting by 2 nuns from a nunnery in Malaysia. We shall start the chanting now. Thank you.
Good.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Asevana tapala nam pajita nan ca sevana puchaniya nam etamam kalamutamam patiru patesava capo pe cakata punyata anta sama paditita etamam kalamutamam pamusatจะสีปัญจวินัยโยจะสุสีขิโตสุภาสิตาจะยาวาเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังมาตาปิโตปัฏฐานังพุทธทาราสสังอนาคุลาจะกัมมันตาเอตัมมังละโมตัมมังเชยันโตโพธิยาภูเรสานันทิวัตโนเอวันตวันวิชโยโหหิชยาสุชยมังคะเลอปาราชิตปันลังเกปัตวิโภคะเลอภิเสเกสาภพุทธานังอาคาปะโตภโมนติสุนังกัจจังสุมังสุปปาตังสุโหติตังสุขโนสุโมโหโตจะสุเยตังพระมจาริสุปัฏฐาคินังกายมังวาจากัมมังปัฏฐาคินังปัฏฐาคินังมโนกัมมังปณิทิเตปัฏฐาคินานิกัตตวานาลพันตเทปัฏฐาคิเนภวตุสัพพมังคลังราคันพระเทวตาสัพพพุทธานุภาเวนัสทธาโสทิภวันตุเตภวตุสัพพมังราคันตุสัพพเทวตาสัพพธรรมานุภาเวนัสทธาโสทิภวันตุเตภวตุขลังราคันตุสัพพเทวตาสัพพสังฆานุภาเวนัสทธาโสทิภวันตุเต Thank you.
宝じゃげる。
观自在菩萨行深般若波罗蜜多时，照见五蕴皆空，度一切 离之。色不异空，空不异色。色即是空，空即是色。受想行识亦复如是。舍利子，是诸法空相，不生不灭，不垢不净，不增不减，是故空中无生，不受想行识，不言而彼色声音。不色声香味触法，不眼见乃至无意识，无无明亦无无明尽，乃至无老识亦无老识尽。不苦集灭道，不知亦无得，亦无所得，故菩提萨埵。依般若波罗蜜多故，心不挂碍，不挂碍故，不有空，不远离颠倒梦想究竟，涅槃三世诸佛，依般若波罗蜜多故，得阿耨多罗三藐三菩提。不知般若波罗蜜多，是大神咒，是大明咒，是无上咒，是无等等咒，能速一切苦，真实不虚不说。般若波罗蜜多咒，即说咒。揭谛揭谛，般若揭谛，般若僧揭谛，菩提萨婆。
大概是。그것도 생각도 돼. 무슨 게 있어요? 야. 다. 장수다.
So you
사제 좀 되는데 최주 콜로 거네. 달로
It's been over 2,500 years since the Buddha first turned the wheel of dharma. And today, we are at a time when there is a huge advancements in material development, and people are distracted from everywhere. Yet the people who follow religious traditions, so these religions are very helpful for keeping one's emotional balance when there's so much disturbance around us. But here particularly we are dealing with Buddhism, the teaching of the Buddha, and the foundation of the teaching of the Buddha is the teaching on the Four Noble Truths. Whether we take the Pali tradition or the Sanskrit tradition, the Four Noble Truths and their 16 characteristics are the foundational teachings of the Buddha. And then with regard to the truth of suffering, origin, this true cessation and true path, which the Buddha taught, what he teaches us is that our suffering and miseries have their causes. And what are these causes? He analyzes them And therefore, we come to the study of psychology or the workings or systems of our mind. The main cause of our suffering are our attachment and that of the anger or hatred. But these destructive emotions themselves are not in the intrinsic nature of the mind itself. And so if we do some analysis, we would be able to tell to a certain degree about this. So the attachment and anger and so forth, these arise due to some appearance in the objects, as if they have some kind of absolute beauty or ugliness in themselves, and therefore we react to them, and therefore we cause suffering. And so, with regard to the suffering that Buddha taught and its causes, for example, the causes pertain to those of the karma, and they in turn are rooted in our mental afflictions, disturbing emotions. And these disturbing emotions are in turn rooted in that of ignorance. And so the Buddha taught that suffering, the truth of suffering and the true origin of suffering, which he has explained in detail. And then he has actually said that there is a possibility to attain true cessation. And here he mainly taught about this through the teaching of the perfection of wisdom teachings, that since the clinging to true existence in things is the root of all the destructive emotions, including those of the attachment and anger or hatred, therefore, that these can be uprooted. And the Buddha taught in this connection the fivefold path, which is shown by the Heart Sutra mantra, and so since these the destructive emotions arise from or through this ignorance, which is the misconception of how things really exist, and therefore the attachment and anger, their objects do not exist, although they seem to hold on to some kind of an exaggerated existence or reality of things. And today, in quantum physics even, they talked about the things not existing the way they appear to us. And so in the Heart Sutra, which teaches the profound emptiness, and says that form is empty. Emptiness is form, and emptiness is not other than form. Form too is not other than emptiness. And so this is called the fourfold emptiness statement on emptiness. And these teach both the extremes, teaches us how to dispel or overcome both the extremes of eternalism or permanence and the extreme of nihilism. And therefore, for this to happen, the Buddha taught that of the profound teaching of dependent origination. And therefore, the teachings, the Buddhist countries such as India, such as China, Vietnam, Korea, Japan, and then we also have those of the Thailand, Burma, Sri Lanka, and so forth, which also follows the Theravada tradition. So in other words, the teaching of the Buddha has spread all over Asia. So, as I said earlier, all the religious traditions teach love and compassion, and which are helpful and useful to people, their followers. So with regard to Buddhism, the Pali tradition becomes the foundation. And then, as the Sanskrit tradition spread wider and wider in India, the Sanskrit became the scholarly language. the language of the learned. And therefore, Buddhism developed further in the Sanskrit tradition. So, with the basis of the Four Noble Truths and the 16 characteristics, the Sanskrit tradition emphasizes logic to delve into the teaching of the Buddha, and therefore there is emphasis on logic and reasoning. Even in the case of a teaching of the Buddha, the Sanskrit tradition, when it finds some kind of discomfort in accepting their teaching literally, then there is this distinction of the decision that these teachings cannot be taken literally. And the Buddha himself has said, "O monks and scholars, just as gold is tested by rubbing, cutting, and burning, likewise you should examine thoroughly my teaching and then accept it, not because you have devotion to me." And so, in the second turning of the wheel of dharma, there is so much emphasis on using logic and reasoning to investigate into the teaching of the Buddha. And so, using logic and reason in Buddhist tradition is very similar to that of the scientific investigation. So science deals with what is obvious. And then when we use logic or inferential logic, then we can actually gain insight into the subtle permanence, and which is to say moment by moment change in things. And on the basis of understanding the causality, we understand that of dependent origination also. And then with regard to dependent origination, there is the dependent origination in terms of how things are dependently designated. And there is also the teaching on emptiness. The emptiness also is something which can be inferred through logical reasoning. So when we take, for example, a form, a physical thing, the Buddha says form is empty, because when we take something physical and try to analyze the thing and try to find its identity, we cannot find anything in itself. And because things do not exist in and of themselves, and therefore it shows that things are dependent. And therefore, Buddha says, emptiness is form. Because dependent origination is feasible, therefore, form and so forth also are tenable to exist, to say that they exist. And so, if they do not exist by way of dependence, we cannot talk about the form and so forth. And so, the Buddha says, form is empty, which teaches emptiness. And then, by saying emptiness is form, he is saying that the form itself has no inherent existence. Apart from that, you cannot talk about emptiness without relating to the form and so forth. And therefore, because things are dependently originated, they are empty of any inherent existence. And then he goes on to say that the form is not other than emptiness, and emptiness too is not other than form. And so this helps to dispel both the extremes of permanence and nihilism. So this is what the Nalanda tradition emphasizes, or particularly teaches. As we refer to Longsu Pusa, Master Nagarjuna. So if you want to know what kind of person he was, we do not need to talk about his greatness through his historical accounts, but if you read the 6 texts, what are known as the 6 collection of reasonings, you can know what kind of person he was. And so the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the fundamental treatise of the middle way, is there in Chinese translation. And the well-renowned scholars such as Master Chandrakirti, Buddha Palita, so they were well-known scholars, learned masters, and who have written a commentaries to Master Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the fundamental treatise on the middle way, and not just explaining the words, but they actually go through the process of analyzing the things, the teachings, by first recognizing what the other's position is, what the antagonist's position is, and then rejecting that, and then and the rebuttal of any criticism to their own standpoint. And so we have these great texts which are not only intellectual texts, but they can actually stir our own negative emotions. So, of course, in India, there are people in the monastic institutions who have memorized the Mula Madhyamaka Karika that we have in Tibetan. There didn't used to be so many in Tibet in the past, but today the number is increasing. And then we do memorize Abhisamaya Alamkara, ornament of for clear realization, and Madhyamaka Avatara, the entering into the middle way. And so these are memorized. Even I have done that when we were very young. And then, having memorized these root texts, then we study their commentaries. And study how Buddha Palita comments on Mula Madhyamaka Karika, and Master Bhaviveka, how he explains, interprets Nagarjuna, and then in the Madhyamaka Avatara by Chandrakirti, how he interprets and the understanding of Buddha, Master Nagarjuna, and so forth. And so these texts do not just say that, oh, this should be so, such and such point should be so because the Buddha taught so or Nagarjuna taught so, but that they use logic to find the truth in the teaching. And this Nalanda tradition was spread in Tibet by Master Chandarakshita, and he was a great scholar. He wrote Tattva Samgraha, which is the compendium of reality, which is a text on logic and epistemology. And then he also wrote Madhyamaka Alankara, the ornament of the middle way. And then, of course, we need to study these texts. Even with regard to Master Chandarakshita's interpretation of Madhyamaka philosophy, we need to see examine it. And so, of course, there is a saying in Tibetan, to the person we should have deep respect and a pure vision, but to the teaching we should actually put it to the test of reasoning with regard to that. So, Master Chandrakirti, at the end of Master the Madhyamaka Avatara, says that in the past there are people such as Master Vasubandhu and so forth, who have not been able to understand the profound emptiness. And so Master Chandrakirti says, do we say that they actually have rejected the teaching of the profound emptiness? And he says, yes. And so the more you delve into this teaching on emptiness and so forth, you find more and more certainty in this teaching, and you can actually draw the teachings of the Buddha, the different kinds of teachings of the Buddha, to this point. So, so towards the end of Master chanting this Madhyamaka Avatara, he mentions this. So that's where he says that Master Subandhu and so forth actually have rejected the teaching of the profound emptiness. So it's verse number 55 in the final chapter, which says, this suchness, just explained, is most profound and terrifying, yet people with past habituation will certainly realize it. Others, however, despite vast learning, will fail to comprehend, and so forth. And so, with regard to Madhyamaka Karika, it had been translated into Chinese before it was translated into Tibetan. And so Vietnamese also have this text, and also those of the Japanese. And so these are our traditional texts. What is important for us is to study these texts. So we all, in the Asian countries where Buddhism has spread, the Sanskrit tradition has spread, we all recite the Heart Sutra, but there are very few who do study of them. So one Japanese abbot, a very nice person, a good person, has once told me that that we, the followers of the Sanskrit tradition, do recite this Heart Sutra, but there are very few who do understand it. And therefore, he actually appreciated my explanation of the text, the Heart Sutra. So we should not leave these texts just like that in words, but we should actually study them, study the texts written by Master Nagarjuna and his spiritual heirs. So I wish to appeal to you to do that. In one time when I was in Japan, in a temple, we recited some prayers and the Heart Sutra. And then after that, during my speech, I told them that we should not just use this temple for recitation of prayers alone, but we should do meditation, and particularly to do study of the teaching of the Buddha. So as the follower of the Buddha, and particularly the Sanskrit tradition, we need to take it seriously to do study of the teaching of the Buddha. For that, you need not be monastics, monks and nuns, and also you do not necessarily need to be religious as such, because even with regard to the teaching of dependent origination or emptiness, even scientists do appreciate this teaching. So you don't need to be a Buddhist as such or religious person, but we should be able to use the scientists are using their own intelligence. And so all of you who recite the Heart Sutra, you should do your best to understand the meaning of the Heart Sutra by studying the teaching of the Buddha. So with regard to myself, as I mentioned, I have memorized the Abhisamaya Alamkara, the ornament of clear realization, and also Madhyamaka Avatara. So at some point in Madhyamaka Avatara, when I had some difficulty memorizing that text, some word that I came across, I had great difficulty memorizing it, so I got a little bit angry and I actually scratched the letter with my nails. So later, when I study these texts, and particularly the Madhyamaka texts, so eventually I could gain understanding and certitude in the teaching of dependent origination, how things are dependently originated and relative. And so scientists, even scientists also take interest in it. And so these teachings are really helpful to use our intellect. And as Buddhists, so developing the intellect in terms of the intellection or intelligence or wisdom for comprehension, clarity, wisdom of swiftness and profound wisdom, in order to counter our negative emotions. So in the 400 verses, it says, just as the physical faculty permeates all other faculties, likewise ignorance permeates all other destructive emotions. Although there are practices such as overcoming attachment through the meditation on a repulsive nature of a body and so forth, and dispelling or overcoming anger through meditation on loving kindness, but the emptiness, the understanding of emptiness is the understanding of or the wisdom which uproots all these negative emotions, as Master Nagarjuna also says. Through the elimination of karma and delusion, there is liberation. Karma and delusion arises through our inappropriate mentation, and these in turn are rooted in our clinging to some kind of a true existence and things, and this is done away by emptiness. And so what happens to us is we have this notion of things having some kind of absolute existence, and accordingly, when we see beautiful things, we exaggerate the beauty of it, and when we see something we dislike, we actually develop anger. There is this exaggerated way of looking at the beauty and the ugliness in these things, and then accordingly we develop attachment or anger. And so when you understand that things do not exist the way they appear to us, just as the scientists also say, the quantum physicists also say, what this helps is to reduce our negative emotions by reducing this exaggerated outlook on things. So when you think about things having no absolute existence, inherent existence in and of themselves, what this helps is to reduce this exaggerated outlook on things. Whether you are looking at something beautiful or ugly, this exaggerated outlook would be reduced, and accordingly our attachment or anger will be reduced. So when you actually investigate into how things exist, when you find that things do not exist the way they appear to us, you will be able to see the truth that things are designated and that they do not exist the way we exaggerate them to be such and such. So this also helps in developing compassion And so compassion as such is do not arise in us because of our clinging to true existence in things, but the negative emotions, these destructive emotions, do arise because of holding things to have some true existence. And the attachment, anger, and so forth arise because we have this exaggerated outlook on things. And therefore, you can see the possibility of transformation within through these insights into how things exist through designation or through dependence on other things. And so I read the Madhyamaka Avatara and Madhyamaka Karika whenever I have the time to do so. And Madhyamaka Avatara mentions the 4 logical absurdities in it. In the lecture Nyingpo, the essence of true eloquence, he mentions these 4, which are mentioned in the Madhyamaka Avatara. Verse I think number 34 and down. There are 3 or 4 verses which say that if things were to have an inherent existence, then the insight or the wisdom of the Arya beings would be a cause of destruction of entities, and that things would be able to withstand ultimate analysis into how them. And so, though we are not able to see or meet personally, but it's very nice to see you as if seeing you personally through this kind of online interaction. So, of course, religious traditions like Christianity and so forth also are very helpful to their followers. So many people benefit from these teachings. And so no religious tradition says that God, the Creator, is full of anger, but they say that God is full of love. Sorry. And so these religious traditions, the theistic religions such as Christianity and so forth, say that God is like our Father and Jesus is the Son of the Father. And since the Father is love, and therefore his teaching, the Jesus' teaching also embodies this teaching of compassion or love. Of course, they differ from the non-theistic traditions such as Buddhism, Jainism, and so forth, which spread in India. But the basic message of all religious traditions is love and compassion, whether it's Parsi or religion or Zoroastrianism or any other religious tradition. And so we, as followers of the Buddhism, and particularly the Sanskrit tradition, we should combine the teachings, pay attention and take interest in studying about love and compassion, combined with the understanding of emptiness. And so these are teachings which are not only beneficial to their believers, but even non-believers could benefit from these teachings. And so in the Indian tradition, we talk about secular ethics. So, of course, people have their individual right to follow a religion or not, but there's no difference that people want a peace of mind or happiness So there's nobody who does not want happiness. And so if you are able to reduce your attachment, anger, and so forth, these destructive emotions, what follows is happiness. So in India, we have this tradition of secular ethics for over 3,000 years. And this tradition has been made more profound and broad and extensive by the teaching of the Buddha, by the Buddha himself, through his teaching. And so we can take his teaching as part of our training of mind and as a study of psychology for our peace of mind. So regarding Buddhist religion, we can actually take the religion aspect of Buddhism is meant for Buddhists. But the other aspects, such as science and philosophy, can be taken as intellectual subjects. So academic or intellectual subject for us. And so we as Buddhists do pray that in order to fulfill the interest of myself and others, may I develop bodhicitta. But although others may not be followers of Buddhism, we can use the teaching on altruism to help them how to develop a good heart within themselves. So if you can do that, it would be beneficial for all. So today, so first, we'll go through the 37 practices of Bodhisattvas. So the author of this text was a contemporary of Buddha Rinpoche. And so he lived in a place called Ngulchu, and therefore from the place he was actually given the name Ngulchu. And Gyalsey, which doesn't mean a prince as such, but a bodhisattva. And so he was well known, renowned as a bodhisattva at that time when he was living. And so there's a story that Buddha Rinpoche was sick at some point. He had some pain in his arms. And so he told Gyalsey Thokme Sangpo, the author of this text, to please blow. It is well known that you are a bodhisattva, so please blow on this pain that I have on my hand. And so Gyalsey Thokme Sangpo was a master of all the teachings in general, and particularly the teaching of the bodhicitta. And he was a master of bodhicitta. So, Namo Lokeshwaraya, it begins with. Of course, there are 8 close disciples who are deities, the disciples of the Buddha. And they were specially taking responsibility to preserve the teaching of the Buddha. And Lokeshwara or Avalokiteshwara is the deity whose name emphasizes that of compassion and Manjushri wisdom. You see, all phenomena neither come nor go, yet you work solely for the benefit of beings. Supreme Guru and Protector Chandrasik, to you I continually bow with body, speech and mind. And so, here, just like the Mula Madhyamaka Avatar salutation, so this salutation is similar to the Mula Madhyamaka salutation verses, which teach dependent origination, free from the extremes. So, when you actually search for the identity of things, nothing can be found to have any objective existence in and of themselves. And therefore it says, you see all phenomena neither come nor go. So while fully absorbed in meditation on emptiness and having destroyed all objectification, but in conventional terms, you work solely for the benefit of all beings. Supreme Guru and Protector Chandrasik, to you I continually bow with body, speech and mind. And next, the perfect Buddhas, the source of benefit and happiness, arise from practicing the genuine dharma, which in turn depends on knowing how to practice. Here I'll explain the Bodhisattva practices. So with regard to the Buddha, who solely thought of benefiting sentient beings, though he lived more than 2,500 years ago, but today Buddha is recognized as someone who teaches love and compassion based on reason. So this verse is the verse to compose the text, the promise to compose the text, and then with regard to the teaching that follows, this text follows the three teaching on the three capacities of beings, which was spread or brought to Tibet by Master Atisha. Now that you have obtained this precious human body, the great boat so difficult to find, in order to free yourself and others from the ocean of samsara, listening, reflecting, and meditating with diligence day and night is the practice of Bodhisattva. This shows that we need to study the text teaching of the Buddha. And passion towards friends churns like water, hatred towards enemies burn like fire, and so forth. And so, what this says is that to abandon homeland is the practice of Bodhisattva. Of course, the place where you were born is very precious to you, but because of being born there, you would also have these negative emotions that arise in you, such as attachment towards loved ones and hatred towards enemies, and so and then towards the neutral ones, ignorance. And so, to abandon one's homeland is the practice of bodhisattvas. Next verse, number 3, giving up negative places, mental afflictions gradually decrease. With no distractions, virtuous activities naturally increase. When mind becomes clear, conviction in the dharma is born. Seeking solitude is the practice of a bodhisattva. So, having given up your homeland, you should not be entrapped in a situation where you are full of anger and hate, attachment and so forth. So this is what this shows, seeking solitude. So friends and relatives acquainted for long will separate. Possessions gained with exertion will be left behind. Consciousness, the guest, will leave the guest house body of the body, to let go of this. So this shows that of the impermanence, teaching of the meditation on impermanence. And next, as Gongda Rinpoche has said, an evil friend will not appear with horns and fangs, but they will pretend to love you, to take care of you. So, if you are distracted away from, if you are actually led astray from the dharma through this kind of friendship, then such a person is said to be an evil friend. And then the next verse, number 6, shows that of the reliance on a guru. So, of course, with regard to the teaching, we need to understand the teaching by listening to someone's teaching. And so the teacher should be someone who is learned in the teaching, plus who has the experience of the teaching, and not just someone who is, who has the name of a teacher without the qualifications. So Je Rinpoche has said that as he relates his own experience of having studied extensively and then having also found the teachings to be instruction, personal instructions, and then actually finally integrating the teaching within himself and gain experience. And so a teacher must be able to explain what he is going to teach to others. And for that, he or she must have learned the teachings, without which, without the knowledge, you cannot teach others. And therefore, the teacher should have both the qualifications of learning and experience. And then verse number 7, which says, themselves captive in the prison of samsara. So this one shows that of taking refuge. Whom can the worldly gods protect? Therefore, to seek refuge in the three jewels, who do not betray you, is the practice of a Bodhisattva. The suffering of the lower realm, so difficult to bear, is what the Buddha taught to be fruit of negative actions. Therefore, even at the cost of your life, never committing negative actions is the Bodhisattva practice. So, when you cause others to be unhappy, to suffer, and that is a negative action. And as a result, what happens is you also suffer. So this is the working of the law of causality. If you do something good to others, there is a good consequence that will happen to you. If you do something bad to others, you will have the bad consequence. And so it is like having the seeds, like the seed of some sweet fruits, which will give rise to a seed. That seed will give rise to a fruit which is sweet. And if you sow the seed of a chili, it will give rise to a chili which is hot. So, never committing the negative actions is the practice of bodhisattvas. Happiness in the three realms, like dew on a blade of grass, is the subject to instantaneous fading away. To strive for the supreme state of liberation that never wavers is the practice of a bodhisattva. So, as I mentioned before, the true happiness, which is unchanging, happens when you attain true cessation, and then eventually reach liberation. And so that when you reach that liberation, having overcome all the negative factors, the negative emotions and so forth, then that is the unchanging happiness. So this shows then verse number 9 teaches the path which is common to the beings with intermediate scopes. And then next, verse number 10, from the beginningless times, your mothers have cherished you, and so forth. And so if you have a loving atmosphere around you, through your own practice of love and kindness towards others, you will be happy as a result. And so when you are in an atmosphere, a loving atmosphere, you will be happy. Otherwise, if you have to live suspecting others or unhappy in an environment where you suspect others, you will not be happy. As the scientists say, as social animals, if we are able to, we survive based on the community. And so your happiness is based on, dependent on the community. Otherwise, if you live one off, like separate from others, you will not be happy. Being full of selfishness and so forth, you will not be happy. As Master Chandideva says, if you do not exchange or switch your joy and happiness with the suffering of others, Even in samsara, you will not have happiness, leave alone reaching enlightenment, Buddhahood. So live alone reaching Buddhahood. Even in this life, wherever you look, right and left, you will be suspicious of others. So not switching your joy and happiness with the suffering of others. Even when you are in samsara, if you think selfish, if you live a selfish life, though you are dependent on this community that you live in, beginning with the community of your family and your mother, right at your birth, from the time of your birth, sucking her milk and so forth. If you live a selfish life, which is a narrow-minded attitude, it's a foolish way of living a selfish life. If you wish to live a selfish life, you should be wisely selfish by thinking of others in the community. And so the more you are loving towards, the more you love others, be kind to others, then you will also benefit from that. If you live with full of jealousy, full of suspicion, doubt, and others, negative emotions, you will not be happy at all. And so, for example, with myself, for these practices of love and compassion and others, I read, when I read these books like Bodhisattva Charyavatara and Madhyamaka Avatara and so forth, I really benefit from them. So, if there's now suffer, what good is your own happiness and so forth. That's right. And next verse, number 11, all suffering comes. Oh, verse number 10 still. So, from time beginningless, verse number 10, your mothers have cherished you, have taken care of you with love. So, with love, you can actually think of others in a positive way, taking care of them. And if they now suffer, what good is your own happiness? Therefore, in order to liberate limitless numbers of sentient beings, cultivating bodhicitta is the practice of bodhisattvas. So though we do want to have happiness, what happens is due to selfishness, we actually perceive others to be enemies. All suffering comes from your yearning for your own happiness. The perfect Buddhas are born from the intention to benefit others. Therefore, to truly exchange your own happiness for the suffering of others is the practice of a bodhisattva. And next, verse number 12, even if someone driven by excessive desire steals your wealth or incites someone else to steal it, so this shows the practice of giving, to dedicate to this person your body, possessions, and all virtue of the 3 times is the practice of bodhisattvas. So when I was receiving the teaching from Lama Tenzin Gyalsey, he told me this story that when Ngulchut Gyalsey Thokme Sangpo, the author of this text, was given lots of offerings in a place for giving teachings and so, or helping others. And when he was leaving the place, on the way, he met with some people who wanted to actually snatch the offerings away from him. And having given that to him, to that person, he actually directed to go certain directions so that they are not harmed by the people who offered those things to him. And verse number 13, if someone cuts off your hat, even when you have not done any slightest wrong, through the power of compassion to take this misdeed upon yourself is the practice of a bodhisattva. So for us Tibetans, we have lost our country, and we may come across people who criticize us. And so when you think about exchanging your own happiness, joy, and with suffering of others, it really helps. Should someone slander you, next verse, in a billion worlds with a loving heart to proclaim his qualities is in return is the practice of a bodhisattva. Next verse 15, if in the middle of the crowd of people someone reveals your hidden faults and abuses you for them, to see him as a spiritual friend and bow with respect is the practice of bodhisattva. So in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, Shantideva says that your enemies are your true teachers, because in the practice of patience, you need people who provoke you anger. And when you have such an opportunity for anger, but you show patience, that helps you to develop patience. If someone whom you cherish as dearly as your own child take you for enemy, then like mother whose child is sick, to love that person even more is the practice of the bodhisattvas. So when someone whom you have done good to actually does something bad to you, like taking care of him like your own child, then like a mother whose child is sick, to love that person even more is the practice of a bodhisattva. So this verse number 17, even when someone who is your equal or inferior and so forth. And then the verse number 18, though gripped with poverty and always scorned, though stricken by acute illness and possessed by evil spirits, to take upon yourself the negativities and suffering of every being, and never to get discouraged is the practice of a bodhisattva. So when you are when there's a risk of feeling totally discouraged, disheartened, and discouraged by the actions of others, you should be able to do this kind of practice, to take upon yourself the negativities and suffering of all others and never to feel discouraged. It's the bodhisattva's practice. And then when you are, next verse shows that when you are very successful, it may give rise to haughtiness and arrogance. And so the verse number 19 shows the practice to counter that. Though famous and prominent, someone to whom others bow, though you amass riches like that of Vishravana. And so these two instances of becoming too disheartened and discouraged and becoming too arrogant are obstacles to your practice of bodhicitta. And so in order to counter that, you should practice taking the negativities and sufferings of others in the first case, and then to see the worldly splendor has no essence, and thus to be without arrogance is the bodhisattva practice. So when you are angry, it helps nobody. It doesn't help you. If you have not pacified the enemy of your own anger, combating other outer opponents will only make them multiply. So you may have one enemy today, but if you try to combat or fight with that person, you will have a next one, a second one, and it will increase like that. So if you look at the world today, those who are full of attachment, anger, and so forth are not happy at all. And so if you practice exchanging and equaling oneself with others, that really will help. Therefore, with an army of loving kindness and compassion. To tame your own mind is the presence of the Bodhisattva. Sensual pleasures, next verse, are like salt water. The more you partake of them, the more your craving will increase. Therefore, when something arouses attachment to abandon, it immediately is the practice of Bodhisattva. And next is the meditation on emptiness. All appearances are your own mind, and mind itself primarily transcends all mental fabrications. Knowing this, and to remain free from apprehending the signs of subject and object, is the practice of Bodhisattva. So here there is the practice whereby you remain in the space like meditation, meditative absorption, and then there is a meditation in the post-meditation session, which is the meditation where you look at things like illusion, to be like illusion. And so, all appearances are like your own mind, and so even quantum physics says that things do appear as if they have some objective existence, but they say that whether things exist or not, whether things are this or that, is dependent on the observer. So without the observer, they cannot talk about an observed object. So this is very similar to this. All appearances are your own mind, and mind itself. So all other things outside of you, or the things such as other objects, yourself and others, are primarily transcend of all mental fabrications. And knowing this, so this mind which sees good and bad and so forth, which are fabrication or elaborations, knowing this, to remain free from apprehending the signs of a subject and object, is the practice of a bodhisattva. Next verse, verse number 23. When you encounter objects that please your mind, like rainbows in the summer season, though they seem beautiful, not to view them as real and to give up attachment to them, it's the practice of a bodhisattva. We'll stop there for today. And then from verse number 24 down, we'll cover tomorrow. So we'll stop here for today. We'll start with the questions, and then maybe tomorrow I may teach the three principal aspects of the path as well.
Question? Oh. Any question?
So please start with the questions.
Your Holiness, good morning.
Yes.
My question is, given that this precious human rebirth is difficult to come by again, I wonder what else can I do to ensure that I can still have the fortune to study and practice dharma in a human form in all future rebirth, besides doing purification and accumulation of men.
A very good morning to you, Your Holiness. We are very happy today.
Okay. So that's all the
receive teachings.
Voice cracking. Voice cracking.
Yeah, my name is Anne.
To work with us.
Question da.
Please repeat your question, please.
Oh.
Repeat now?
Yeah, let's repeat the question.
Heard your question. He's always heard the question. So as Maitreya says in the prayer, Bodhicitta, he bows to Bodhicitta, which leads one from the lower realms, away from the lower realms, leads one to the higher realms, and finally the deathless state or liberation. And so all the misfortunes that we face or encounter comes because of our selfish attitude, selfishness. So the more you are less selfish, you'll be happier, you'll be more relaxed, and so this life is meant for serving others. And therefore, through this practice of altruism, what happens is you'll automatically turn yourself away from the avoid the lower realms of existence. And the more you, to the best of your ability, if you help others, it will help you to gather the requisite causes for higher rebirth, and therefore, having attained rebirth in a higher realms of existence, life after life, then finally what you will be able to do is to reach that of liberation. And so for this life, to live a good life in this life, you need to practice bodhicitta, and also to be able to attain higher rebirth in the next lives, life after life. Also you need to practice bodhicitta, and so this leads you to the final enlightenment as well. So with regard to bodhicitta, you have a wisdom which focuses on enlightenment, and with compassion you focus on sentient beings. And so here, when we talk about this profound bodhicitta, so at least if you could be a warm-hearted person, not harming others, what you will be able to do is gain a rebirth in a higher realm of existence in the next lives. So that's the least kind of thing we can practice, although we talk about compassion and wisdom. So understanding of wisdom also is attached and correlated to.
So the next question is from Eric Tan. He is a general manager from Malaysia.
His Holiness, good morning. My question is, even though today we haven't started the test, but I want to know, how can a beginner study and reflect on the three principal aspects of the path as compared to a practitioner who has some understanding of two truths and the Four Noble Truths?
So
the three principal paths are renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view. So the first one leads to liberation, and bodhicitta leads you to omniscience, Buddhahood, and the correct view leads you to both.
So
to live up to the measure of these three practices. So the teaching of the Buddha, in the teaching of the Buddha, in general, as I explained, the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths. The first one is the true suffering, the truth or the true suffering. The true cessation. So when you actually have to understand true cessation, you need to understand the two truths.
So suffering comes due to the origin of suffering, but suffering also changes moment by moment. So because we have the seeds for suffering within ourselves, because we have created the causes, so though we may not have this suffering or the active suffering, but we have the seed for the suffering. So understanding the two truths is important. Even in the case of Vaibhashika philosophical school, they talk about the two truths, saying that things which can be, which lose their identity when you break them or when you actually dissect them into their components, and which are said to be conventional. And then the other philosophical schools also do teach about the two truths. So the precise and the final way of how things exist is taught by Buddha, Master Nagarjuna, and this is explained very thoroughly and correctly, precisely by Master Chandrakirti. So if you could study his text, so if you give thought to the two truths, you'll be able to see, through this understanding of the two truths, that the cessation or true cessation is possible. So I have been thinking on emptiness since since a very young age, and today, even today, I do think about emptiness. And so, in the towards the end of the Madhyamaka Avatara, chapter 6, Master Chandrakirti mentions about how one can reach that of this true cessation. He says through his mind. Though his mind may this illuminated by the rays of wisdom light, the Bodhisattva sees clearly as clearly as a gooseberry, and so forth. And so, for me too, having given thought to the two truths, I could also say that maybe this is also possible. So, as in the Madhyamaka Avatara, the two truths taught there, so there is an apparent level of understanding the truth. But when you actually delve into how things exist and try to search for their identity in the things and beings themselves, nothing can be found to be this or that. Things can change because they do not have any essential intrinsic existence in and of themselves. If things do not exist, if things do exist intrinsically, then this change also cannot happen. And so, in order to understand the two truths well, you should study Madhyamaka Avatara by Chandrakirti. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Holiness. And the next question is from Nisara Sitatiknawek. She is a content editor from Thailand, and she would like to pose a question to you.
Good morning, Your Holiness. It's my very pleasure to meet you virtually today. I have a question for you. If someone has too much of self-esteem or extreme level of ego that prevents that person from learning or listening to other people, how can we help them?
Robert Candice So generally speaking, not only human beings, but all sentient beings, even down to the insects, everybody has this sense of an I. But humans have this brain with which we can think through. On top of having this notion of an I, what we do is to help it more. There is this arrogance and jealousy happens to us. So if you are selfish, very selfish, strongly selfish, then you will be. If you cherish yourself strongly, that automatically gives rise to selfishness. To counter that, if the person needs to be more compassionate, warm-hearted towards others, cherishing others over oneself, and that also helps to counter the arrogance. So you do not need to talk about religion here. What they need to understand is that if they remain selfish and arrogant, nobody will come near that person. People will say, oh, that person is very arrogant, very selfish, and you'll be left. Whereas as social animals, if we remain friendly with others, you will benefit. Whereas if you remain alone, then you also lose. So if you don't despise others, look down on others, but instead have warm heart towards us, be kind to others, you will benefit. So although we all have this self-cherishing attitude, but what we need to do is to be wisely selfish. Because if you remain foolishly selfish, you would be the loser.
Thank you, Your Holiness, for your very inspiring answer. And the next question is from Sally Matimu. She is from Indonesia. She is an author.
So Indonesia
and
also
an author.
And Sangpo.
Good morning, His Holiness.
Yes.
Good morning, Your Holiness. In current situation where suffering occurs and many people lost their jobs, how can we explain to others about suffering in form that can be easily understood and help them in a real life? Thank you.
So, on the one hand, today, from amongst us, within the 7 billion people on this earth, there is this huge gap between rich and poor. So, this is one problem that we have. So, in this kind of situation in the world today, what the rich people, the wealthy people should do is to help the poor, not just giving material help, like giving clothes, food, and so forth, but mainly giving education, helping them through education, by giving them education. So if that could be done, I think it would be good. And then with regard to the pandemic, the current pandemic, we need to have the experts, with the experts are doing their research, of course, which is very good, and they should continue with this research, with their research. And then the public should take every precaution to not suffer the disease. And when the vaccine comes out, we should also be able to use them. So the main thing, what I think is, in India, there are many people who are unemployed, and in Mumbai, Kolkata and so forth, the rich people have huge mansions, buildings, whereas there are poor people who live very poorly. And so there is need to uplift the condition of the poor and the needy. So in 1954-55, when I was in China, I learned about socialism, so which I found very good. So socialism doesn't talk about making people rich, few people rich, but thinking of the general public. So in terms of political belief, I am a socialist. So it is very important for us to think of the poor people. So compared to Africa, there are so many where there are so many poor people suffering. Compared to that, the Europeans are better. So we should do our best to reduce this gap between the poor and the rich. And we should actually uplift the condition of the poor by giving education and making them making investment through this kind of projects, by educating the poor and giving them incentives to build their livelihood. Next question.
Thank you, Your Holiness, for your answer. We have come to the second last question, and this question is from Chanting Mantreng. She is from Vietnam. She is an educator and the founder of Ichigo Kindergarten in Vietnam.
Good morning, Your Holiness. My name is Trang from Vietnam and member of Snow Lotus Foundations. My question is, what should Buddhist educator and parent do in order to ensure the children continually grow up in happily in the current chaotic world? Thank you.
So it's very important to give education to the children. So of course, we do talk about modern education. So the world is giving education based on modern education, an educational system, which actually spread from the West. So this is an education which is more, a system which is more focused on the material development alone. Whereas in India, in Asian countries also, we have this tradition where we teach about how to calm and control our negative emotions, how to be subdued, to have happiness, and to have a happy family and happy society. it's important to understand the workings of the mind and emotions, or learn about psychology.
modern education
So in India also, modern education is the standard of modern education is very good, but that alone is not sufficient. I tell the Indians to introduce the study of mind and emotions, which come from the Indian tradition, in the educational education system. So the modern education alone is not sufficient. So the study of mind and emotions should also be introduced in modern education system. So I usually relate about hygiene of emotions. Though hygiene of physical hygiene of our body is included in the education system. So with regard to the study of mind and emotions or psychology, because of lack of this the study of hygiene of emotion, once the children enter into schools system, because there is no teaching on how to deal with our emotions, and how to develop love, compassion, and so forth, there's not much teaching or idea in the school system. Whereas in a home, in your family, if the parents are kind, warm-hearted, and always caring for their children, it helps the children's emotions. Whereas if the parents do not care about their children, the children also do not accordingly develop more negative traits. So the children naturally are pure. Whereas the children are poor in themselves, innocent, but because of education, though the children, if you put them together, they'll play and laugh with each other and so forth with each other. But because of the education system that we have today, not emphasizing the inner world of our mind and emotions and developing kindness and so forth, there is this education lacking in the school system. We lack in the understanding of the mind. So on top of the modern education, which has spread from the West, I am telling the Indians to revive their own ancient Indian wisdom knowledge, wisdom tradition, which teaches about the good qualities that we can develop. And so you, living in the Buddhist countries, have your Buddhism as your tradition. You could also include or introduce the teachings of psychology, the study of mind and emotions in your school's curriculum. So this is what I wish to appeal to you as Buddhist people in the Buddhist countries to do.
Thank you, Your Holiness, for your answer. We have now come to the last question for today, and this question is from Lau Chun Ho. He is a musician from Hong Kong.
Good morning, Your Holiness. My question is, Hong Kong seems to have lost its directions. Please guide us through practice during the difficult times. Thank you.
So in this world, on top of the problems that we usually have, there is an extra problem caused by the politicians as well, which is very complicated. So regarding the situation in Hong Kong, So because of the government of China, the Chinese influence getting stronger and more, what is important for you, Hong Kong people, is not to be emotionally disturbed. So when you're faced with problems, you should see what kind of means you can actually, what are the means that you can overcome these problems, and whether there is something that you can whether the situation is something that you can overcome or not. You should check that. So as Master Shantideva says, if there is a remedy, if there is a solution or remedy, what need is there to be unhappy and worried? If there is no remedy, what use is becoming worried, being worried? So, while you have the problems, you still need to still need to search for the means by which you can overcome that. Through whatever means you can overcome, you should use those means to overcome the problems. The climate change or the global warming, which is becoming worse and worse, is something perhaps is out of our control. So some experts say that this will increase further, and so perhaps we may not be able to do much about that global warming. Whereas we have this brain, human brain, and human heart, and the courage and the determination should not be lost. So if you are determined with courage and looking at the situation, what you need to find the various means to overcome the problems.
Thank you, Your Holiness. Thank you very much for your time. And we are indeed very, very privileged today to listen to your words of wisdom. And we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow morning. Thank you very much.